She was just a maid until a millionaire heard her crying behind a door. She worked in silence, cleaned without rest, and cried only when no one was watching. But one night, a stranger heard her pain, and what happened next would rewrite the story of her life. If you believe that quiet strength deserves to be seen, this story will stay with you. The La Vista Grand Hotel towered above the city like a silent monument to elegance and exclusivity. Its glass exterior shimmered under the silver hue of the evening sky, and the marble columns inside reflected the golden chandelier lights, casting soft glows across the polished floors. Guests moved through the vast lobby with the ease of people accustomed to being served, while staff members moved with the practiced grace of invisibility. Among them was Emilia, a 24-year-old housekeeper whose uniform was always pristine, whose steps were always quiet, and whose presence was always professional, yet unnoticed. Each evening, Emilia pushed her linen cart through the long, echoing corridors, attending to every detail with silent precision. The scent of lavender cleaner trailed behind her, and the rhythmic squeak of the cart's wheels had long become background music to her thoughts. No one ever stopped to ask her name. No one ever saw the worry in her eyes. And no one knew about the storm she carried inside, especially not the fear that gripped her heart each time her phone vibrated with a call from home. On this particular night, as the city dimmed into a soft hush and the last suite on her floor had been turned down, Emilia retreated to the small storage nook near the emergency exit. There, tucked behind her linen cart and surrounded by bottles of detergent and spare pillows, she finally let her guard down. With trembling fingers, she pulled out her phone and answered a call she had been dreading all day. Her mother's voice came through the line, tired, shaky, and desperate. The news was the same as it had been for weeks. Her younger brother's condition was worsening. The medication they had scraped together money to buy was almost gone, and there was no more left in the budget. No charity, no clinic, no promise of relief. Emilia bit her lip hard, so hard she tasted blood, but she didn't let the tears fall right away. She whispered back, her voice cracking under the weight of hope and helplessness. She pleaded for more time. Just a few more days. She would figure something out. She always did. As the call ended, she remained still, curled against the wall, hiding her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook silently. She knew she had already picked up every extra shift she could. She had stayed late, skipped meals, and walked home in the dark just to avoid spending on transportation. But even her relentless effort wasn't enough. The hospital bills didn't care about overtime. Illness didn't wait for paychecks. She didn't know that someone had heard her. Down the hallway, just beyond a marble column, stood Lucas Martin, a man whose name appeared on Forbes lists, whose investment empire spanned continents, and whose face was rarely seen without a camera flash nearby. He had just returned from a late investor dinner, still wearing his tailored navy suit and carrying the tension of a dozen deals in his shoulders. He hadn't meant to overhear anything. In fact, he had only come down to clear his head. But when he passed the storage nook and caught the faint sound of a choked sob, something made him pause. He leaned subtly against the wall, out of sight, listening without meaning to. He heard fragments. "Please don't sell the car. He needs the medicine. I'll work double shifts," and felt a quiet jolt deep within him. It wasn't just the desperation in her voice that struck him. It was the way she was trying so hard not to ask for help, not begging, not complaining, just surviving. He should have kept walking. He knew that. She was just an employee at a hotel he occasionally stayed at when visiting the city. a face in the crowd, but something about her voice, raw, steady, breaking in the quiet, pulled him back into a part of himself he thought he had locked away years ago. He didn't approach her that night. When she stood up, wiped her face, and resumed pushing her cart down the hallway, he remained where he was, watching, thinking, wondering when was the last time he had truly seen another human being, not as a role, a number, or an asset, but as a person. The next morning arrived in a haze of golden sunlight and polished surfaces. Amelia returned to the same hallway she had cried in only hours earlier. Her eyes were puffy, but she had reapplied her makeup with careful hands. Her steps were steady. She pushed the linen cart forward, back into the rhythm of routine. There was no time to be tired. There was no time to fall apart. She had only one thought in her mind: earn enough this week to cover the clinic visit her brother needed. As she reached the last suite on the floor, a soft voice called from behind her. She turned, startled, and saw him, Lucas Martin. She didn't know his name yet, didn't recognize his face. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, only a casual shirt and slacks, but there was something unmistakable about his presence. He looked at her not with pity, but with attentiveness, measured, calm. He approached her slowly, respectfully, and handed her a simple dark blue card. On the front was his name. On the back, an address and a note. If you're open to something different, come tonight at 7 p.m. Amelia stared at the card long after he left. Her heart pounded. Her first instinct was suspicion. This had to be a mistake, a trick, maybe even a cruel joke. But something in his tone, and the way he hadn't tried to comfort her or lecture her, felt different. Real. The rest of the day passed in a fog. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind, the way it cracked with exhaustion. The memory of her brother coughing in the background, the ache in her own chest that no rest could soothe. That evening, Amelia stood in front of a tall wrought iron gate on the edge of a quiet neighborhood lined with old trees and ivy-covered fences. She wore her cleanest blouse, her only pair of presentable jeans, and shoes that were just slightly too big. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught each time a car passed, but she pressed the button on the intercom anyway. A woman's warm voice greeted her, and moments later the gate opened. The house was not what she expected. It was large, yes, but not ostentatious. Built in the colonial style, it had wide porches, warm lights spilling through the windows, and a feeling of stillness that wasn't cold, but comforting. A woman in her 50s, with soft eyes and a kind smile, opened the door and introduced herself as the house manager. She welcomed Amelia inside and led her past a cozy living room with old records on the shelf, and into a sunlit veranda with 2 chairs and a teapot. Amelia sat alone for several minutes, clutching the card in her hand, before Lucas appeared, not in a suit, but in jeans and a sweater. His presence filled the space, not with power, but with something quieter, something steady. He poured her a cup of tea and explained why he had invited her. He offered her a job, not charity, not pity, but a role that would allow her to live in the house, assist with organizing his late father's personal archives, and take time off whenever she needed to visit her family. She didn't answer right away. Her hands shook. Her thoughts spiraled. But as he spoke, she realized he wasn't asking her to owe him anything. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was offering something she had never truly had, a chance. That night, when she returned to the small room she rented above a corner store, she stared at the card again. She thought about her brother, about the way her mother's voice always faltered now, and about the way Lucas had looked at her, not like a burden, not like someone broken, but like someone who mattered. She made her decision. Tomorrow she would leave behind the echoing hallways of the La Vista Grand. Tomorrow she would walk through that gate again, not as a housekeeper, but as someone beginning a new chapter. The next morning, the sky stretched wide and soft above the city as Amelia packed the few belongings she owned into a single worn-out bag. Her uniform, folded with care. Her shoes, the same pair she wore to work every day. A framed photo of her mother and brother. There wasn't much to take. Her room above the convenience store was quiet. Bare walls, a narrow window, the muffled hum of traffic below. She paused only once, letting her fingers hover over the card Lucas had given her. The edges were slightly bent from being held so tightly. The address written on the back had taken root in her mind like a song. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. Not her landlord, not the night manager at the hotel. She simply left the keys on the desk and walked out. A black car waited for her on the curb sent by Lucas with a polite driver who didn't ask questions. The city slipped away behind the windows as the car moved toward quieter streets, towards neighborhoods with older trees and wider lawns. Amelia's heart thudded with every passing block. Her fingers clutched her bag tightly in her lap. Every instinct in her told her to run, to distrust, to doubt, to fear. She wasn't used to kindness. She didn't know how to receive it. As the days turned into weeks, Amelia grew into the space around her. The routines became second nature. She found joy in the smallest things, folding old letters with precision, arranging files alphabetically, dusting off forgotten manuscripts and giving them a home. She stopped fearing each phone call. Her mother's voice sounded less strained. Her brother had access to medication again, thanks to the steady income. Though Amelia never asked, she suspected Lucas had quietly made arrangements to ensure things ran smoother back home. But he never said so, and she never asked. There was something sacred in the quiet distance between them. Every few evenings, Amelia and Lucas crossed paths, sometimes in the garden, sometimes near the kitchen, once during a storm when she found him standing by the window, watching the rain. They spoke little, but the silences between them were not awkward. They were filled with something weightier than words. They were building something without realizing it. Amelia began to sleep better. She stopped flinching at small sounds. Her hands, once always trembling, moved with more assurance. The house, once strange and distant, now felt like a quiet cocoon. A place not just for shelter, but for healing. She was no longer only a girl scrubbing hotel bathrooms at night, hiding her tears from passing guests. She was a caretaker of stories now, of a man's memories, of fragments that meant something. She mattered here. One morning, she awoke early and wandered into the garden just as the sun rose. The light fell across the lawn like honey, warm and gentle. She sat on the bench beneath the old tree and listened to the birds. In that moment, she wasn't worrying about money. She wasn't calculating shifts or bills. She was simply breathing. In the weeks since she had arrived, no one had shouted at her. No one had criticized her. No one had treated her like a burden. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. She belonged. And something inside her, something that had been buried under years of exhaustion, was beginning to bloom. The rhythm of the house settled into Amelia's bones like a soft heartbeat. The stillness, once unfamiliar, became a kind of song, a quiet harmony between her movements and the pulse of the place. Each morning she rose not with dread, but with calm. The guest room was no longer a stranger's shelter. It was becoming a home. She had grown used to the garden's gentle breath outside her window, the soft creak of the wooden floors, the smell of old paper and fresh linen blending in the corridors. The house had not changed, but Amelia had. Slowly, silently, she was being rebuilt. The work remained steady. She immersed herself in sorting the family's archive piece by piece. Some days she found herself smiling while reading a particularly whimsical entry in Lucas's father's journals. Other days she paused, hands resting on letters that dripped with sorrow. The documents were more than a job. They were mirrors to the lives of those who once walked the same hallways she now cleaned with reverence. It was during one of those afternoons, with sunlight slanting through the tall windows of the library, that the world she had carefully pieced together began to tremble again. Her phone rang, not loudly, but with enough urgency to pierce the sanctuary around her. It was her mother. The voice on the other end was thin, quivering with worry. Her brother's condition had worsened. The new medication was no longer enough. The doctor recommended a stronger, costlier treatment, something far beyond what Amelia's earnings could sustain. Her mother's voice cracked under the weight of desperation. Amelia sat still, the receiver pressed to her ear, her other hand clenched tight. The storm she thought she had outrun was back. The room seemed colder, the light harsher. She hung up without knowing what she would do. Panic curled in her chest like a fist. Later that day, Lucas noticed the change. He didn't need to ask. The silence between them was no longer an absence. It was a language. He watched her more carefully that evening as she continued to work, her movements slower, heavier. He didn't interrupt. Not immediately. But eventually, as the sky dimmed and the shadows grew longer across the house, he approached. Quietly, gently, with the same steadiness he always carried. Amelia, standing near the shelves of labeled folders, felt his presence before she saw him. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. She paused. She didn't want to unravel, not here, not again. But the words came, slowly, haltingly, until the story spilled out. Her brother, the cost, the fear, the shame of needing help again after finally beginning to stand on her own. Lucas listened without interruption. His expression didn't shift to pity. It remained centered, rooted in something deeper than sympathy. Then, unexpectedly, he offered his own story. He spoke of loss, not just of people, but of time, of dreams, of peace, of a younger version of himself who tried to outwork grief, believing that money could armor him from pain. He admitted that it hadn't, that his power never protected him from the quiet places where sorrow lived. Amelia listened, and for the first time saw not the composed billionaire, but the man underneath, the one with cracks in his foundation, just like hers. He didn't offer her money. He didn't offer to fix everything. What he offered was something far rarer: presence, understanding, a steady promise that she would not face her storms alone anymore. Amelia took his hand when he extended it, not out of desperation, but out of something stronger: trust. The next day, with Morella and Beth, an older woman who helped cook and had once been a nurse, they sat together in the kitchen and discussed what could be done. No judgment, no disappointment, just ideas, suggestions. Beth spoke of local organizations and clinics that might help cover the medical cost. Morella volunteered to help organize a small benefit gathering at the estate, something quiet but meaningful. Lucas stayed silent for most of the conversation, letting the women take the lead. But Amelia knew, without a word, that he had already begun making quiet calls of his own. The house buzzed with a different kind of energy in the days that followed. Amelia found herself coordinating with neighbors, scribbling lists and even helping arrange decorations for the benefit event. The once quiet house gently opened its arms to guests, friends of Lucas, supporters of the cause, kind strangers. Some gave money, others brought supplies, but most brought something even more valuable: encouragement. Amelia stood in the background, overwhelmed, watching people support her brother without knowing his name, offering hope without needing gratitude. When the event ended, Lucas found her on the front porch, staring up at the stars. The storm had passed. The air smelled of fresh leaves and earth. Amelia stood still, unsure how to speak, her heart still full. Lucas simply stood beside her, not touching, not rushing, just being. He told her she had done something extraordinary. Amelia didn't argue. For once, she allowed the warmth of pride to settle in her chest. She had stood still in the face of chaos and found a community willing to stand with her. The girl who once cried behind a hotel linen cart was now someone others came to help. Not because she begged, but because she mattered. The next morning brought lightness she had never known. Her mother called with good news. The treatment had arrived. Her brother was smiling again. Amelia sat on the bed, phone pressed to her ear, tears sliding down her cheeks, this time not from fear, but from relief. She went to the garden to think, to breathe. Lucas was already there, seated on the low bench under the ivy. She didn't speak. She only sat beside him, and for a long time, neither of them moved. Time passed. The days resumed their slow, thoughtful rhythm. Amelia continued her work in the archives, but now she did it with new eyes. The papers still held stories of the past, but she began to see them as letters to the future. Her future, her brother's, even Lucas's. Sometimes he joined her, reading passages aloud, his voice catching on certain memories. Their silences became filled with more than comfort. They became charged with quiet affection. Glances lasted longer. Touches lingered. But nothing was rushed. Nothing was declared. Love, when it began to form between them, did so without urgency. It simply lived in the spaces between sentences, in the way she brewed his tea without asking, in the way he always left a lamp on for her when she stayed late in the library. One afternoon, Lucas led her to a smaller garden behind the house, a more private place with a stone path and wildflowers blooming freely. He told her he came here when the world became too loud. Amelia understood instantly. She walked the path slowly, fingers brushing petals, her breath even, her heart full. He said he wanted her to know this space, to use it as her own, not as a guest, not as an employee, as someone who belonged. And she did. By then, Amelia no longer walked through the house with hesitation. She moved like someone who had found her place. She laughed with Morella. She read poetry aloud to Beth. She lingered in the kitchen just to listen to the comforting rattle of pots. She called home every evening without dread. And Lucas was no longer a shadowy figure she feared. He was her friend, her quiet partner in stillness, her proof that love could grow not through grand gestures, but through presence. One night, sitting by the fireplace with Morella and Lucas, Amelia whispered a thank you. Not for a job, not for charity, but for seeing her. Lucas looked at her, something unspoken in his eyes. Morella smiled softly, sipping her tea, and in that quiet, fire-lit room, Amelia understood something she had never believed before: that healing did not require perfection, that love did not require performance, and that being seen, truly seen, was the most powerful thing of all. The storms would come again. Life would still be uncertain. But now she was not alone. She had a home. She had people. She had hope. And she had herself, no longer a broken piece in someone else's story, but the author of her own. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life inspired tales. We post stories that remind us of the quiet strength inside us all. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? We love seeing our community grow across the world.